Welcome to the JPP, the Jewish Philanthropy Podcast. JPP with David M. Cohen, rabbi, lawyer, fundraiser, therapist, and author. Money makes the world go round. It makes different people do different things. In this podcast, we explore views of money and how money is used to impact lives around the world. Each week, we'll engage with another interesting personality in the fascinating and diverse world of Jewish philanthropy. Let's begin now.
Why come to Car Sharks? Why not? Our core beliefs and our foundation is built on customer service. No does not exist in our vocabulary. Think Amazon for cars, except we'll go to the Gaza Strip and back in a yarmulke for you. Service doesn't end when you get your car. Every single customer has my personal cell phone number. So if you're looking for a car, you want to get out of your car, carsharksauto.com or 516-399-1500.
I'd like to welcome our guest to the show, Mr. Avraham Lewis. Mr. Avraham Lewis is the CEO and Chief Fundraising Consultant for Avraham Lewis Consultants. He's somebody who has had a vast impact on the Jewish philanthropy world, and that's why he's on the JPP, the Jewish Philanthropy Podcast. And he's somebody who coaches many, many individuals in the Jewish community to raise their game and to raise their results. And somebody who's really been on both ends of the spectrum in the sense that he began his career as a development professional and he's transitioned to coaching. And we're going to explore together here this morning how he kind of became who he has become and what we can learn from his experience. So welcome, Avram, to the show. It's great to have you.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me on.
I love that. I like the accent. You're initially from Great Britain, I gather, and you now reside.
Yeah, I mean, I try and keep the accent down to a minimum when I'm speaking to the American audience because I know that they're swayed by the accent and they actually believe what I say.
Okay, that's good. And now you reside in the Holy Land of Israel.
I live in Israel in Ramat Bet Shemesh.
Oh, amazing!
The last 24 years.
Wow. Okay. Terrific. So that's tremendous. It's great to have you on the show. So I'd love for you to tell our listeners a little bit just about yourself, your upbringing, kind of bring us a little bit up to speed to where you are today.
Okay, fine. So I grew up in that happy place they call England, where we had a very nice secular upbringing with a lot of rain and not much else going on. And as soon as I was old enough, I started traveling the world and seeing there's a bigger world out there than England, which got me to Israel. And I actually, Aish HaTorah found me.
Just interrupt for a second. You grew up in Manchester, is that correct? I saw
you. Yeah. The rain. Don't get confused, right? So it rains a lot in Manchester. I was actually at university in Manchester. Okay. I was studying business management there in the Manchester Business School, and in one of my last summers in university. So that's where Aish HaTorah actually came to England, and they found me amongst a bunch of my friends who were typical secular, assimilated, middle class Jews who had everything going for them, and took me to Israel for an extravaganza program. I came back to university, finished my degree, and went back to Israel. And I was in Aish HaTorah for 5 or 6 years and learned there.
So just tell our listeners a little bit about what Aish HaTorah is, just maybe people who aren't familiar with it.
Oh, fine. So Aish HaTorah is a yeshiva for people who haven't been religious and became religious Orthodox Jews. And it's a place where the main concept, the main focus is that every individual can impact the world to be a better place. So with that vision, that drive, with that energy, I was fully now feeling ready to make a difference in the world. And there's various types of ways a person can make a difference in the world. I don't think I was a teacher, and I didn't have that as part of something that came naturally. But I saw different visionaries in Aish HaTorah and outside of Aish HaTorah who were making a difference in the world. And I felt that my place could be actually driving the funding I had no experience fundraising whatsoever. I was as a kid all the way through to university. I was fascinated by business. I was reading business articles, business books, biographies of business people, and it drove me to build my own business, be an entrepreneur. When I came to Israel and I came to Aish HaTorah, I was inspired by the concept of actually using the skill set I had to actually make a difference in the world, not making money, although definitely useful, but actually affecting people's lives. But the concept of money, and I know this show is about people's relationship with money and fundraising, giving, and raising money. So the concept of actually soliciting people, asking people to join a cause, be part of something much more meaningful was very attractive to me. So I started in at the deep end in fundraising after learning in the yeshiva for a number of years. And I got myself married, Baruch Hashem, and then I actually joined a project which I can tell you a bit more about, which was my first fundraising position. But that's my brief bio.
Okay, cool, terrific. That sounds fascinating. Tell me, so you mentioned you grew up kind of middle class, right? So I mean, were you exposed to philanthropy as a child, like kind of growing up? Were you exposed to it in terms of being around people who were people of means, or people who just, what was your perspective on money kind of until you kind of reached the point where you began fundraising?
Yeah, so it's funny. I don't think England as a whole is a philanthropic country. I mean, it's not, and it's not like America. And in the Jewish world, yes, it is philanthropic. In the secular Jewish world, I didn't see much giving, apart from the synagogue annual campaigns, of which I don't remember anything standing out as anything exciting, or I don't remember seeing or hearing of anyone who was givers. So money was definitely important in the lives of the people that I was around, but as a means of acquisition as opposed to distribution.
Interesting. So we heard already, you kind of shared with us teaching. You didn't think teaching was going to be your direct, although you are a teacher today, one-on-one, and maybe even to broader audience of fundraisers. But you kind of gleaned based on your business background that you could be entrepreneurial and you can really make an impact in terms of trying to help funds to fund amazing programs within the Jewish world. So your very first fundraising initiative, your very first context of raising funds, take us back there a little bit. Tell us a little bit about what that was like.
There was a project I got to know because I became very close to the founder of the project. It was called Common Denominator.
Okay.
It was Israel-based. And it was a project that was teaching or developing Jewish values curriculum for Israel's schools. And it was a project which united Jews of all backgrounds towards a common shared goal of values that we all agree upon, and values which are essentially Jewish, which in Israel the separation between religion and state. So there was although there was Tanakh, for example, taught in secular schools in Israel, there wasn't Yiddishkeit, it wasn't Jewish values taught. And so I was at the forefront of a group of people who were developing a values curriculum. Now, the project didn't continue, and it wasn't because of lack of funds, because we did great in the fundraising. So I came in right at the beginning and really mentored with an inspirational visionary. His name's Rabbi David Geffen. And I was very close with him, and I learned a tremendous amount with him, and he inspired me with a passion. He also came from Aish HaTorah. He inspired me with a passion of someone who has a real vision of what he wants, big picture vision, and then works towards making a difference with a project that can actually have a chance at achieving that vision. And so we did a lot of fundraising together, and I learned from him, and I kicked off a lot of initiatives myself in the fundraising. And then funny, you might ask later, I guess, in the show, how I transitioned to being a fundraising coach consultant. Well, that began early on. I always saw the whole picture of how to get from A to B. You want to raise money. What do you have to do? How are you going to get there? And it was a real two-way relationship. And I didn't realize it at the time because he was such an empowering person, gave me so much ability to do things myself. But there was a real two-way relationship where he benefited a lot from me as I did from him. I didn't realize it at the time.
Cool. What were his greatest strengths as a fundraiser?
Relationship. And it boils down to it. Whatever, the concept of relationship is key. It's not about getting money from somebody, but it's about developing a relationship, giving them a connection to a broader vision, giving them a connection to making the world a better place, and partnering with us, with me, with the organization to actually make a difference. And so there was another number of strands there. But firstly, relationship, because relationship can change worlds. Secondly, helping someone who maybe has money, but apart from money doesn't have a more meaningful way of making a difference in the world, by allowing them to partner in a project that is making a difference. And you're creating a strong connection between the two of you and between you, your project, and the Jewish people.
So Avraham, let me take a step back, and it's probably a very, very basic question that many fundraisers, I think, have, which is kind of, I think a lot of people get that it's about the relationship, and it's about a lot of the things you've said, broader vision, connecting a person of means to meaning and to the vision. But just very basically, how does one build a relationship? I know it's like a very easy, simple question. Like, what do you mean? You talk to them, like, but I think a lot of people so you have major philanthropist just for example, let's just pick a crazy example. I don't think he's Jewish as far as I know, although I know he has warm feelings for the Jewish community. The Oracle of Omaha, Warren Buffett. Let's just say, so you had on your radar, you have a prospect named Warren Buffett. I assume you can get in contact with Warren Buffett. I assume anybody can figure out how to reach him on some level. You might not have his personal cell phone number, but in the Jewish world, there's usually somebody who can get you to somebody else. I mean, how do you start? You're basically cold. They don't know you. You don't know them. You'd like to get in front of them to make them, I think, initially just comfortable with you, to see that you're somebody serious. You're somebody who might have something of value to offer them. What would you suggest to young beginning fundraisers, just creative ways to get in front of that prospect, to sell them on your vision, or to make that contact, to build that relationship? I was curious to hear your thoughts on that.
You bring up a good point. Look, most relationships aren't built on cold calls. I'll give you an example of what you're saying in a way that I did it. There were most ways a person gets into, at least who I'm working with and what I've seen, the way you get into big people is via people that you connected with. So I had one of my earlier successes in fundraising. I had a connection, actually the person who owned the building that I lived in when I first got married. And we were paying with them a visit, and they said, we've just been come in contact with this chap, this guy from England, actually, and he may like what you're doing. Why don't you give him a call? So I gave him a call. I went to England. I made a meeting with him. He kept me waiting for the 40 minutes, like people often do. Right. And I got into his office, and he says, "I'm really sorry for keeping me waiting. I only have 5 minutes." Right? This is a guy who is in his young 30s. He's built a pharmaceutical business, which it seemed impressive for someone of such a young age and such a big business. So I had 5 minutes, and remember the principle here was you've got to build relationships. So what do you do? So what did I do?
I'll just get interrupted for 1 second. It's like the famous idea. There's a famous concept in Torah study that if you only have 5 minutes a day to study Torah, what should you study? So they say you should study Musar, you should study character improvement works, because by doing that, you'll come to appreciate that you have more than 5 minutes a day to study. So I imagine your answer is going to be something of a similar ilk. So you only have 5 minutes. So
firstly, the way to build relationship is to take a genuine interest in the other person. So at this 5 minute meeting, I said, tell me, how did you build this place? Like, how did it come about? So 5 minutes became 1.5 hours, where he suddenly found enough time, to that, because I was genuinely fascinated.
Right.
I wasn't trying to get anything from him, and I was trying to understand who the person I was speaking to was. And he'd heard a bit about me. He checked out our website. He'd heard about me. So, you know, apart from a brief introduction, it was all focused on him. And 5 minutes became 10, which became 20. And his assistant kept calling, and he said, push off this meeting, cancel this.
He was enjoying himself. He was enjoying himself.
Yeah. So 1.5 hours later, he's like, I really gotta go. It's been so fascinating. He said, it's been so fascinating speaking with you. I mustn't have said more than 10 words. Right. So what was at the core of that? The core of that was a genuine interest in another person for who they are. And so you're probably wondering what happened next. So he said, I'm actually going to be in Israel next week. So I said, that's fabulous. So why don't we meet up again? I brought him to the office of our organization, and I asked him the same question essentially again with the founder of the organization. And that was a 3-hour meeting where we obviously had food delivered at the same time, because and he carried on, you know, for 3 hours. And this guy he wanted to be heard. He wanted to be listened to. And he was a fascinating person.
Right.
And that was the foundations. Now, and maybe some of your listeners, if not many of your listeners, are going to say, well, people don't seem to give me the time of day. So, you know, we always have to have creative strategies of how to engage people.
So let me just quickly reiterate. So just to consolidate what you said, I heard you say, when you're dealing with somebody who's kind of a dream prospect, but not somebody that's easily accessible to you, so it often helps to find a point of connection or a point of contact. So in your context, you were fortunate through your landlord to find a point of connection, somebody who can kind of open the door for you and at least make that entree or that introduction. Then once you get in, so the point you made was you want to give. You want to be somebody who is there to really listen, to understand who that person is, what it is that interests them. And then you were fortunate, of course, that he was coming to Israel the next week, and he was willing to subsequently meet and to deepen the relationship and to learn more about your organization in the flesh, come to the offices. So I'm curious, did you, at that point, you only knew the person now a few hours, second meeting, did you make a concrete ask at that point, or did you wait to further cultivate the relationship?
Right, so that's a good question, because I'm definitely of the mindset of making an ask, getting a donation, and developing the relationship based on the fact that the person's now invested. Mm-hmm. But this particular person said to me, look, I'm going to be selling my business in the next 3 months. And so I want to make a significant gift. I like what you're doing, and hold off.
He told you not to ask. I mean, he said now is not the best time to ask. You find it
too busy for him. And he hadn't sold the business, so it was only theoretical, and he wanted to wait until he actually had the money. So that was that in that particular sense. Now, I know, and maybe if the listeners want to hear some more principles, that the way we're really going to decide when we're going to ask, and what if we're going to ask, develop the relationship, and then ask and then develop the relationship. A lot of it is based on uncovering the preferences of the donor. What would he feel most comfortable doing? What did he have in mind? The asking itself, we're going to tell him what our needs are, what we had in mind, finding that commonality between what he may be able to do and what we actually need funded. But in terms of when is the right time, we need to uncover and explore and ask and find out. Unless the person says, okay, I'll meet you with you, and there's a certain expectation implied or not implied, but that you're going to come to ask. And and I've had 1,000 meetings like that. You call up, you want to speak to the guy, you tell him why you want to speak to him. He's a giver. He's giving you the meeting not just because he wants to schmooze, but because you want something and he's there to give it.
Right. Mm-hmm. So this particular story that you told is a work in progress, if I understand it correctly, or it still hasn't come to fruition?
Oh no, that was a decade ago.
Oh, okay. So how did the story end?
when as he said, he sold his business, and that ended up being a 6-figure donation. And it was, you know, it was something where he felt very easy saying yes. He'd had enough exposure to myself, to the founder, to the organization. He'd come in, he'd met everyone, and he was ready to be a part of it in a more significant way as his first gift. And it was really his first significant gift he'd ever made.
Wow. Okay. And was that somebody who you continue to have a relationship with? You know, you said it was a decade ago. Did you continue to have a relationship with him, you know, over the years?
Yeah. I mean, I did, and we continued raising, like, you know, him giving money for a few years afterwards. You know, certain things went on after that. But, you know, in terms of a relationship, it was a relationship based on shared values and understanding. And definitely there's good relationships with big donors and like more difficult relationships with big donors. This would be considered a good relationship with the big donor, something that people generally, you know, dream of.
Gotcha. Before we transition talking a little bit more about, you know, your role as a consultant, I'm just curious to hear, and I think a lot of people are always curious to hear, kind of what do you consider to be your greatest fundraising success? Both, you can kind of categorize this in two ways. One would be in terms of just, let's say, pure dollar value, kind of what was the biggest gift that you were ever able to obtain on behalf of an organization. And secondly, just maybe that was your greatest feeling in fundraising, or maybe not. Maybe sometimes a great success could be you get no money from the person, but you know there's still impact made or an introduction to somebody else. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Right. Okay. So, you know, all the big successes that I saw in fundraising were always on the back of doing some hard work in a different direction, putting in a lot of major effort in one place, and something opens up in another place. Right. that had little bearing on my actual effort. Mm-hmm. So there was one great success which really exhibits that. I was privileged to make a parlor meeting in the chief rabbi's house in London.
Rabbi Sachs, the previous one. Okay.
Yeah, and the whole reason that came about, I can't even remember the reason that came about. But I met up with him, and he agreed to do a parlor meeting in his house, and he agreed that we can invite all the people that he like that.
Wow.
That he knows, like meaning, you know, the extended, like, well-to-do Jewish community that are, you know, connected. And we put in a tremendous lot of work to make it a success. And
just to create context. So at that point in time, you were raising money for which organization?
So this was for Common Denominator.
Oh, for Common Denominator. Okay, fine.
So we had the parlor meeting. We had that parlor meeting, and it was a tremendously not successful event, for the simple reason that we didn't get any donations.
Okay.
Right, you know, you can't get more not successful. You know, like fundraising is about the dollars, or
bottom line,
the pound sterling in this case.
Right.
And so, and I was wondering to myself, how, you know, we put in all this effort and nothing, and it was like, so it was almost, there was everybody who we could have invited, we did invite. And out of those, a nice portion of people came who were so well connected with foundations and their own money, and tremendous great like opportunity. Nothing came from it. The next day, after that parlor meeting, I'd arranged a meeting with somebody it was a very, very good lead. And this meeting came out of the most bizarre thing. That a friend of mine who was a supporter, a donor of mine, happened to be at another parlor meeting in 10 Downing Street. And that parlor meeting came out of, I don't know if anyone remembers, Tony Blair. So his wife had said something very anti-Israel one time about the fact that Palestinian suicide bombers also were counted amongst the people who died in a suicide attack. So the Jewish community got her to apologize, and as a way of teshuvah, of repentance, they asked they wanted, I think, one family that anti-terror to host a parlor meeting in 10 Downing Street. You know, wow. The White House of.
Yeah, right.
a donor and friend of mine was at that parlor meeting, and at that particular parlor meeting was a person who was in the same high school as him, like a nice private school that he went to. And this guy had been a few years older, and at the parlor meeting, both successful. My friend was relatively successful, and this guy happened to be a family of billionaires. Mm-hmm. So he got schmoozing with him, and he wanted to, and this guy was someone who was very disconnected from the Jewish community at the time, and he wanted to share with him maybe a project that he could inspire this guy with, the Jewish project. And he started telling me about my project. So the next day, my friend donor calls me up and said, I got speaking with this guy, and he wasn't interested at all in what I had to say. But why didn't you call him up? You got nothing to lose. So the next day I called him up, and he couldn't hear me. He's like, I can't hear you. It was a really bad line. And he said to me, why don't you just call my assistant and make a meeting? I can't have a clue what you're saying, which was a good example of a very bad call.
Right.
So we had the meeting. So this meeting was scheduled for the next day after this tremendously unsuccessful parlor meeting. And we went to this meeting. I brought the founder of Common Denominator came to England with me, and I'd organized this, and now we got this meeting. And this meeting ended up being a meeting where we raised, it was six-figure sums again, but it just was out of the blue. There was like no effort involved. It
right.
didn't.
Here you are. You're trying to make this big event by the chief rabbi's house, and you're putting in all this energy and effort, and it doesn't result in.
And even funny enough, that day before, there has been a major Jewish philanthropist had been by this new philanthropist. And this well-to-do American philanthropist has been to his office, and he said to him, anything you give to a Jewish cause, just the day before, anything you give to a Jewish cause, I'll match.
Mm.
The day before, like you can't get like more
right.
divinely inspired than that. And so this was hot, and we were a Jewish cause that stepped in his door the next day.
Amazing. So it's something that you're bringing to the fore, which I hear from many people, and it's also a principle in the Talmud as well, which we actually you find in the tractate Megillah, which is in preparation for the Jewish festival of Purim, which is not that far off. It's about 10 weeks away, and that is the famous dictum of Yagata umatzata tamin, that if one puts in Yagia, if one puts in the requisite effort, so then that which they are putting effort into will come to them as a mitzvah, meaning almost like as a mitzvah means something that you find unexpectedly. And it's something that many of us men of faith certainly believe, that in this holy work that we do of raising funds for important causes, that we're very much reliant on the hand above, and that a lot of it is out of our control, and that most of it, if not all of it is, and we just do the requisite effort. And oftentimes we put in the effort over here, and then God sends us the shefa or the bounty from another direction. And this, of course, is a beautiful story that brings that to the fore. So I want to talk a little bit, if we can transition a bit, in terms of, you're obviously a very, very skilled fundraiser who's had a lot of success in helping organizations that you've been passionate about. You talked about, beginning your pathway closer to observant Judaism through Aish HaTorah, and then getting involved in integrative types of pursuits in the broader community in Israel as well, to what we would call maybe tikkun olam, and to find connection between those who are more observant, less observant. And obviously we're aware that when we're passionate about something, we're going to be successful at it. And that makes a lot of sense for people to raise funds about things they're passionate about. I'm curious kind of why or how it came to be that somebody who has been so successful at raising funds, they say those who can, do, those who can teach. So it's obviously not the case here. That's a joke, obviously, but you obviously can do. And obviously those who can do very well are the best teachers, in all sincerity. But I'm curious kind of how it evolved for you, that you transitioned. You have a very successful practitioner. I'm a recipient of your communications, very impressive, weighty communications that you send out often to your lists in terms of content and challenging people to think about philanthropy. So I'm curious kind of what made you decide that you wanted to invest your energies more in the realm of helping others.
Right. Okay. Good. So, you know, the whole concept of fundraising coach, fundraising consultant, it was an idea that I didn't know existed. I didn't know there was such a thing. When you work with small Jewish organizations, you don't know there's such a thing as getting external advice and paying for it. At least I didn't know about it. And
by the way, I mean, now it seems to be very prominent. I mean, now you see,
it does, right?
I see many people now that are actually, you know, who have obviously they started as fundraisers, and there are many consultants now. It's very interesting.
Right. Yeah, and I up till that point I didn't know. So what I was doing is this: I was always, when you do raise money, so you're always speaking to other people raising money, and you're always schmoozing about, you know, helping each other, and I was always reaching out to people I knew and seeing how they were doing, and they were sharing their challenges, and I was always helping them overcome the challenges. It was just something I did. Whether that would be people who were above me in age and experience, who were asking for my advice, or people who were starters, or people on the same level. That was one of the things that I just was natural to me. It was part of me. And another thing was this: I really wanted to make a difference in the Jewish world. And I guess if you're working for an organization where the budget's under $1 million, there's only a certain difference you can make.
Sure.
If you work for a really big organization, you know, unless you're the biggest guy around, and you know, you know, every great golf player or tennis player has to have a coach. You know, and the best golfers and best tennis players, you know, the coaches are someone who have the eye on how to make the best person greatest. I didn't feel I was great at what I was doing. I felt I definitely had a passion, and I definitely enjoyed it, but I wasn't great, and I felt that I was restricting myself. I felt that there was a way that I could actually make more of an impact in the Jewish people. And I was toying with the idea of how I could do that without this knowledge of consulting and how it works and coaching. And so I found myself a few guinea pigs, people who I offered to help them with a concept, and they both said yes, obviously, but in a free but more professional way.
No, for sure, it's a great idea.
And through doing that, I saw that I had a real product that others could benefit from. So that's how I kicked off. With those,
I wanted to interject. I mean, I think what you said is incredible. I mean, for a person to be humble enough to kind of always assess, kind of, you know, I may be very good at something, maybe somebody else may be better at it, but where I can make the greatest impact, I think that's incredibly insightful and incredibly powerful. I like the idea very much what you said about, you know, we don't think like this in life. Many of us don't think this way, in the sense that, I'll just pick Tiger Woods, for example, as a golfer, or Roger Federer as a tennis player. You know, even the all-time greats all have coaches. In America, the NFL playoffs are going on right now. You know, and a lot of criticism of the coaches, etc., on different teams. But, you know, everybody has a coach, and there's a reason why, you know, probably not that many people, probably not that many fundraisers have coaches. Somebody they can get feedback.
The greatest people have coaches.
Right.
So
it's really, so let me ask you this. And before I hear more about your consulting practice, which I'm very interested in hearing about, and kind of some of the things that you're seeing out there and some of the things that you're actually teaching, I'm curious what, you know, and just only because I'm pushing back, only because you said about yourself, like you said you were a very good fundraiser. You didn't think you were a great fundraiser. What makes a great fundraiser? What have you seen that really, what do you think really separates the good from the great fundraisers?
Right. Okay. That's a great question. Firstly, anyone who works for someone else is always going to be challenged by the fact that it's not their organization. And the people I work with are almost all the founders or the heads of the organization, small to medium-sized Jewish organizations. When you get someone who's actually completely given of himself to start an organization, right, or to take over an organization, but to take responsibility, to take the burden on his shoulders, to be the one who's guiding, leading, and growing an organization that's making a difference, that's a very different position to having a job as a fundraiser. Now, obviously, in bigger organizations, you know, you need teams of fundraisers. And I don't have an experience working with a bigger organization, so I don't know what it's like.
Right.
So the people who are the greatest are the ones who have that burning passion, but the greatest of those are the ones who are able to share and express that passion to others. A lot of great people I meet and I work with, they have the passion, but they don't necessarily know how to articulate that passion to others and get them to give. That's right. That's a lacking, but not, meaning they have so many other skills that have allowed them to build an organization that is making difference, doing so much, making an impact. It's just now the donor side of the organization, it maybe is not as strong. They had a passion for teaching, for making a difference in society. Tikkun Olam, like you suggest.
So the ability to consolidate and to be able to communicate, it's you certainly a prerequisite to be successful is passion, but certainly one has to be able to synthesize and bring that passion to life so that it impacts and it lands on donors. So I hear that 100%. I'm curious though, you know, most people don't have the, you know, I don't know if you call it good fortune or not good fortune to found an organization, to found a mossad, to, you know, feel like it's, you know, it's theirs, they own it, they feel the sense of responsibility, but certainly are prereqs to being a great fundraiser, as you're saying. Let's say, so I'm just going along your line of reasoning. I'm imagining that even if it's not your organization, but you know, you work for an organization, I guess one has to feel like, one has to imagine to be incredibly successful. One probably has to feel like it's theirs. They have to take that level of responsibility to really reach the status of, like, obviously everything is in divine control, but practically in terms of our perspective, what we can do, it sounds like even somebody who's not the founder probably needs to adopt like a founder mentality to reach great success.
Right. So yeah, so I always say take ownership of something. Take ownership of something which you can achieve. Take ownership of a project. Take ownership of a certain area of funding which you care about.
Okay, cool.
And that's a different world. You know, a fundraiser may be required to raise a certain amount of hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And that could be that he knows he needs to do a certain amount of work and reach out to a certain amount of people. But when he actually makes it his and the donor feels that, right, then it's going to come across differently. Because most donors, you know, they read below the surface. They read the subconscious of what can I give this guy? How much does he care? Is he real? I like the organization, but you know, what am I giving to the? Is a balance between the guy who's soliciting me and the organization that I'm giving to?
Excellent. I think that people give to people. As people always say that, so that certainly is a great truism. That, you know, you can have a great cause, but you also have to have a great conduit. Who's a great connector, who's connecting the philanthropist to the cause. Let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about your consulting business. I looked on your website. It's very, very impressive. And I'll recommend people go there. And at the end of the show, we'll obviously give people the address and where they can go. I see you have an array of people giving you accolades in terms of the difference that you've made in their fundraising. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about your consulting business and maybe some of the great successes that you've had. We've heard a little bit about your successes as a fundraiser. I'd love to hear a little bit about your successes as a consultant for other fundraisers. And I'm sure you feel a real part of the work that they do. So please share with us a little bit about some of your greatest consulting successes.
Yeah, it's funny, you were asking me about how you get into, you know, having that passion. For whatever, you know, the makeup I have, I get passionate about other people's projects. And the more I help, the more I get passionate about them. It's a funny thing. So for me, my greatest pleasure is helping another person succeed in their fundraising, or helping them build their organization, helping them create the clarity of their vision and what they're doing. So just a few successes is, you know, it's funny, every day there's successes. The other day I did a challenge to somebody. The conversation was, okay, he's got a meeting with a big guy. And I challenged him, if you get $150,000 from this guy, I want a $50 Amazon voucher. The next day in my email, I see a $50 Amazon voucher. I was like, woohoo! Right? He already paid me.
You weren't excited about the voucher. You were excited about his success, obviously.
I was excited about the fact that we did it together, and he was so happy to give me that $50 voucher. It was just it was a little thing. So one of the early on success, which I like sharing because it's an example of what I did do and what I didn't do. So there was a guy I was working with. We discussed a certain prospect. He was having that prospect meeting that day. We decided that he was going to ask him for $10,000. And he went to the meeting, and it happened how some meetings don't go according to plan. And the guy said, I'm going to give you $5,000. So he's driving home from the meeting, and he's like, like really frustrated. He needed the 10. He wanted the 10. He should have asked for the 10, and he was going to ask for the 10, but the guy said, I'll do 5.
The guy preemptively said 5. That happens very often in meetings, yes.
Yeah. And the challenge, and this is something I deal with a lot, is now what to do. Now what do you do? He said he'll give you this. But, you're stuck.
Right.
So I didn't do, at this example, I didn't do anything. And the reason I like it as a success, he said, I was driving home from the meeting, and I asked myself, what would Avraham tell me? Right. This particular scenario was the guy said, you have my credit card details, charge my card $5,000.
Right.
Fine. So he's driving home, and he says, I know what Avraham will tell me. He'd tell me to call the guy on the phone and say something. I think he said something like this. And he was like, wow, that's so spot on. I would have told you that. He said, Jack, I was wondering whether I could charge your card 10 instead of 5. That was the line he said that I would have said.
Right.
And I would have said it. But it's not that I did say it to him. Right. He just had that clarity. Meaning, when you're in the thick of the fundraising situation, it's very difficult sometimes to dislocate yourself from it. Like, what do I do? The pressure's on. I've got to ask. I'm not sure what. Oh, he gave me the... When you step back from the coaching perspective, it becomes much easier. What would Avraham have said?
Right. No, that's super cool. That's a sign of a great teacher, where the student kind of, that's like also the concept in the Torah that Yosef, when he was about to commit an iniquity with the wife of Potiphar in Mitzrayim in Egypt, so he saw Demus Diukno Shel Aviv. He saw the image of his father at that critical juncture and moment to save him from the sin with somebody else's wife. And you're saying the same thing, that your pupil was able to see the image of Avraham at that moment. I'm assuming, because I'm a fundraiser myself and I've had these situations, that advice that he intuited that you would have told him, and that he did, before I even ask you if he succeeded, I'm assuming he did get the 10. That probably only works if he didn't haggle with the donor at the moment in the meeting. Meaning sometimes a guy says, I'm going to give you 5, and you say, oh, can you do 10? And he says, no, I can only do 5. At that juncture, you're probably not going to call him back, an hour or two later and say, can I charge 10? That's probably already like chutzpah, that's too much audacity. But if you,
I think so.
Right?
It depends on the situation, but it's from the example you just gave, I think so. But remember, what we're doing with donors is obviously, if we wanted 10 and we only got 5, okay, that's right now. We're always looking at the lifetime value of this donor and the relationship and what we have. And so sometimes there's ups and sometimes there's downs. Right. But on the whole, we're trying to develop a long, and successful lifetime value with each and every donor. And that's often worth a lot more than the loss that you have in the short term.
100%. We're playing, many of us are playing, we're playing the long game. We're going to be doing this for a long time. And we certainly don't want to alienate a donor. And it's very important to kind of get the donation on the books, get them engaged, get them involved. And obviously we try to raise them over time. So that makes 100% sense. I'd love for you for a few minutes, if you'd be willing, I'd love you just to share a little bit about kind of, I don't want you to give away all the trade secrets because we want people, of course, to hire you, but just a little bit of a sense of some of the things that you bring to the table, or maybe just some examples of the unique insight that you provide to a client, or the unique structure. I see you talk a lot on your website about organizing or having an order of the day. If you're willing to share just a little bit of some of the tricks of the trade, kind of what you're inculcating, what's unique about what you're inculcating in your mentees that maybe people who don't have a coach are missing out on.
Right. Okay. So one of the problems I see with almost everybody I work with, is they don't have enough time for their fundraising, and they need to raise more money. One of the challenges is they have more fundraising than they can manage that they have to do. And so what I work with people on is not just the fundraising mindsets, the correct mindsets, the correct attitudes, and working on the fundraising strategies that work, the principles behind it, and the particular nuances of particular situations, and techniques which I'm bringing from the world of psychology, the world of business, through and through the experience working with non-profits throughout the Jewish world, from Los Angeles to Melbourne, Australia, where you see where people succeed and where they fail, and you can bring that experience over. Not just that, but when you step out, when you zoom out a bit and look at the entire picture of who this person is and what their responsibilities are, and then help guide them in the juggling act that is life or is our profession, and how to most put in their best shot at with everything they're doing, and how their fundraising can be an essential, solid part of that they are in a way that's balanced. And so I've created like methodologies for productivity, and within fundraising, a system that simplifies the decision-making process that we all have to go through in every step to allow us to get to the outcomes that we want. It's funny, there wasn't anything out there available. You know, we have donor databases, you know,
Sure.
many donor databases available, but they're all places for storing information. Now,
Right.
a few of them in the last few years have become a bit more in line with the concept that I bring out, which is we don't need to store information. We need to actively engage with information to get us to a certain point. And so I came up with a very simple methodology. I call it the high-rise system for helping all the people I work with. And it's really the driving force of a successful fundraising operation.
That sounds incredible. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head in the sense that many of us, myself included, are perpetually putting information into our databases, but maybe we only look at it once a year. Meaning, how much are we interacting with that information? How much are we proactively using that which we hear in our conversations with prospects and with donors, and actualizing it and helping us, you know, reach and attain our goals? I'm just curious, kind of on average, how long do you work with a client? I mean, obviously some you probably work with shorter, some longer, but how much time?
I'm happy somewhere between 6 and 12 months.
6 and 12 months is where you've seen, that's kind of the sweet spot where you've seen actualization and really bringing people to where they want to go to.
Look, when I work with people, this is not a sales pitch, but when I work with people, the first month is I guarantee. Meaning, if you're not satisfied, then you know the whole investment you get back, and we don't have to continue. Because I believe in the first month, if you can't see this is going to be of value, then you know who would want to obligate somebody? Right. So the first month is a real eye opener, and what can be achieved in the first month is astronomical. It's, you know, black and white depending on where you are, you know, in terms of your inabilities or disorganization or just overwhelmness, or even, and I love working with successful fundraisers, because the more successful fundraiser is, the more I can help them become even more successful, because there's so much more potential. But whoever they are, the first month is amazing, but 6 months to 12 months, we really get to drill down and create an order, a seder, a methodology, and a mindset that is really an investment for life.
Okay, cool. So we're basically wrapping up here. I want to just maybe ask you one final question, and that is, you know, look, we just started 2019. It's an exciting time on the secular calendar. Everybody's kind of, it's a new tax year. There's brand new opportunities. Everybody's kind of reorienting, restructuring, kind of getting excited for a year of great successes. And I'm curious, just kind of, you know, what some of your projections are, just based on what you're seeing in 2018 from the people, from your clients, and what you're working, you know, people you work with. Share just a little bit with our audience what you are seeing in terms of new innovations in the Jewish world of philanthropy, Jewish world of fundraising, ideas, you know, thoughts you may have, something a little out of the box. Just kind of curious to hear a little bit about what your projections are for the future.
Okay. Look, you know, it's increasingly becoming more difficult to access our donors. You know, the more we're able to have many channels of communication, the more it's harder to actually connect. You know, throughout, it doesn't matter, you know, throughout the world, throughout the Jewish spectrum, it doesn't matter if our donors are, you know, left, right, religious, not religious, it's so much more difficult. And when it comes to a relationship is as good as the relationship, you know, without interaction, then, you know, what is it? And if you want to get different results, I mean, if you want to get through to people, then you've got to do something different. So the question that I challenge the people I work with, and I'm happy to come up with solutions as well, is what are we going to do different that's going to allow people to want that relationship, to want that interaction? And one of the key ways, and this is, you know, as old as fundraising, but one of the key ways of giving that connection is to really give the donor a part of the story which we're telling of the difference that he, together with us, is making in the world. And I feel that it's too late, but it's never too late, that the quality of interactions in nonprofits I see, whether they're the ones I help or the ones that I haven't yet helped, is so poor. You know, really poor. And there's a lot to learn from the non-Jewish world, you know, from some of the better organizations. But one of the things I feel that should be at the center of every person who has to fundraise is, if he can't bring the donor to the organization, he has to really bring the organization to the donor in a way that's alive and it's vibrant. And it's just like you see, like, you know, in the last, I'd say, whatever, you can tell me, 3 or 4 years, the quality of homemade videos and pictures and everything is just increased astronomically. Just the high quality in the business world, you see it, everything is increased in quality, and the non-profit world is so far behind. Lagging behind,
right, 100%. I mean, this idea of what I heard you say in terms of differentiation is something that we hear often about in the for-profit world, in the business world, where there's so much noise and one has to differentiate, something that I speak about a lot in the different contexts where I have the opportunity to speak. I think it's incredibly true. And I think that many of us as fundraisers have to be thinking about kind of how do we engage with our donor base and our prospect base differently? And how do we stand out? How do we draw attention to ourselves in a positive way that reflects positively on the organizations in which we represent? That's creative, that's energetic, and obviously, right, this is very broad, and obviously specific solutions could be worked on kind of with people who work with you specifically, and each of us engaged in this profession have to think about it more carefully. But I think it's an excellent point that we have to be progressing with the times, and we can't be resting on our laurels, because everybody's advancing in sophisticated fashion in so many different realms, and it's much more glaring and striking when we're kind of lagging behind. So I think that's a great point. I'm just going to ask you one final question, which maybe I should have asked you earlier, but it's just kind of a curiosity in terms of, just tell me a little bit about your personal interests outside of, we talked a lot mostly about your professional career and the impact you're making professionally. I'd be curious just to hear, I saw on your website that you're into mountain biking, but how do you spend your leisure time, if you have any?
Good. Okay. I was hoping you weren't going to ask about my personal interests. So you know, funnily,
in all fairness, it goes to the core of relationship building, in the sense that many of us are able to connect with donors and prospects because we have commonality, whether it's I'm a huge golfer or whatever it is that we love, that we can connect with other people. It also kind of, you know, it sheds light on, is this somebody I want to work with? So I think it's actually very much on point to what we're doing here.
Right. So look, I have a passion for helping people realize their vision, and whether they're working with me or whether I'm interacting with them, there's at the root of every person is a tremendous koach, a tremendous strength. And my passion is helping people realize that, whether it's in their professional life or their personal life, whatever it may be. So aside from the mountain biking in the hills of Beit Shemesh here, really engaging in that, and and apart from that, every free moment I'm spending trying to engage in Torah learning and self-development and self-growth, which is personal passion. Obviously, if I'm willing to help others, I'm excited about helping myself.
That's certainly a beautiful end to this discussion. And Avraham, I want to thank you so much for your time and for your insights. They really were truly impactful, and I think many of us will grow from reflecting on what you said. I'd love for people to subscribe to your weekly newsletters, check out your website. Do you want to just share with our audience a bit where people can find you, where people can reach you?
Sure. I guess the simplest way is avrahamlewis.com. That's AVRAHAM LEWIS, avrahamlewis.com. And there they can find out a bit more about me, a bit more about what I do, and sign up for my weekly. I do a weekly blog where I'm giving as much advice, mindset, strategies, and techniques in fundraising in a gamut of different areas every week. And the list is growing, and I've got this lovely community of subscribers who there's a lovely interaction back and forward. And so, it's a passion to be helping the wider community beyond those people I can actually service on a one-on-one level. So love you to check that out. It's Avraham Lewis, AVRAHAM LEWIS.
Okay. Amazing. So Avraham Lewis, thank you so much for being on the JPP, the Jewish Philanthropy Podcast. I want to thank our sponsors again. I want to thank Car Sharks and also Majestic Passover in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We're appreciative of their support. And thank you so much again for being on the program, and I look forward to being with our audience again next week.
Thank you for listening to the show. If you have any feedback or comments, you can reach Rabbi Cohen at info@rabbidavidmcohen.com or on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. If you have any suggestions for participants in the program or are interested in sponsorship opportunities, contact us as well.
For me, that I call